Hello and welcome to the Business of the Business podcast. I am your co-host JP John Paz from the Two Man Power Trip. Of course, joining me, the financial wrestling genius himself, my co-host, Mr. Lavie Margolin. Lavie, how you doing today, sir?
Hey, John, I'm doing well. Unexpectedly today, a lot to talk about with TNA, a lot in the news, and then it just prompted me to think about some more things to dig deeper on the surface. But, John, I'm so sorry. There will be no here and there today unless we get there and it goes faster than I expect.
Damn it, that's my favorite. Here and there is definitely my favorite. My favorite to say, that's for sure. When you're looking at though this TNA news and this TNA stuff, it's crazy. It always seems like they're doing well, they're doing well, they're doing well, but for some reason they feel like the need to change things on the the corporate side, the upper tier, if you will, the people up above. It just seems like there's always an influx of change, no matter what's going on.
You know what? Yeah, you know what that might be? Maybe it's like, and this is just speculation, I have no idea. This might be like an upper management thing where maybe some people are getting too much of a high profile and they have to be knocked down to size, like from a corporate level, to be like, oh, okay, this person is responsible for them drawing, their best house in 10 years, or this is a great creative angle. And then somebody comes out and it's like, okay, we're going to have to knock you down to size. You're just an employee here, even if you're an executive, that sort of thing. Crazier things have happened in the corporate world, but who knows?
Yeah, like a humbling, if you will, an Iron Sheik style humbling is going on. It's just crazy because it's like, wow, TNA's on fire, TNA's doing this, and then it's like Anthem Sports makes 10,000 changes for TNA. It's crazy. So maybe is it a confidence in ownership? What's going on?
So survey says. So I would say the second most popular survey that I ran, reflecting back on the one we did last week, I wouldn't say it's highly scientific. It's of course just the people that have seen it through my X and how it's been shared and so on. But with Anthem Sports, including TNA Wrestling, in a constant state of executive change the last several years, do you trust TNA is in good hands with Leonard Aspera, of course, the person that runs Anthem Sports and Entertainment? In a moment, we'll talk about what that might mean. 44 responses. So 18% said yes, they do trust his management. 45% said no. 20% were neutral. And 15 or nearly 16% said, let's wait and see. So no's were nearly half. Yeses were less than 20%. Other people were up in the air.
Kind of think, to me, I'm going to be a wait and see. You know what I mean? I got to do the wait and see approach on that one because it just seems like what in the world they're killing it right now. They should have the biggest house they've ever had. Everybody should be happy. Everybody should be right where they need to be. Nope, let's make some more changes. Like, man, like two big houses in a row like that, breaking a record for them, and that's not good enough. I mean, I'm wait and see for sure. So, who the heck owns these people? Who are these people?
Yeah, so I want to come back to this. Of course, we've talked about on the show for years now. An article that I wrote researching, like, who is Northern Pacific Group? Do they own Anthem? And it never seems to like carry over into like the wrestling media where people are like, Northern Pacific Group owns Anthem, which owns TNA. Like, no one ever talks about Northern Pacific Group. So, John, I'm not sure if you're into the AI. I was very skeptical of it, but on X, there's something called Grok. And I
Yeah.
got like a little bit obsessive about asking questions of Grok. So from what I gather, it scrolls the web, usually about 15 result pages, puts it together, and then serves it to you. So is it 100% accurate? Probably not. Depends what it's reading. But I'm just going to read a few points that Grok served back to me. Now, if people are listening from Anthem Sports Entertainment, TNA Management, and so on, please, if there's any corrections here, anything that you feel is misrepresented and so on, please reach out immediately and we will issue a correction, or at least share your side, because, it's a little bit unclear. So first question, what is Northern Pacific's group's relationship to Anthem Sports? NPG, a private equity firm, acquired Anthem Sports and Entertainment on September 1st, 2016. This acquisition marked NPG's entry into the media sector, specifically targeting Anthem, a company focused on operating specialty video channels and across linear, digital, and mobile platforms. Following the acquisition, NPG became the owner of Anthem Sports, based in Toronto, and operates various media properties such as TNA and so on. The relationship is one of ownership, with Northern Pacific Group having invested in Anthem to support its growth in the media and entertainment industry, particularly in sports and niche content markets. Next, is Northern Pacific Group the boss of Len Asper? No, NPG is not the boss. NPG is a private equity firm that acquired Anthem, a company where Asper serves as president, CEO, and majority shareholder. We talked about the acquisition date, but it does not directly control or manage Asper himself. Asper continues to lead Anthem as its CEO, overseeing its operations, while NPG acts as the financial backer and owner of the company. In a private equity structure like this, the firm typically provides capital and strategic support, but the day-to-day leadership remains with the company's management, in this case, Asper. So while NPG has ownership authority over Anthem, it's not accurate to say they are Asper's boss in a direct supervisory level. However, I then asked NPG a question, not saying that they should, just trying to learn about the structures. Could Northern Pacific Group terminate Len Asper from Anthem Sports if it wanted? Yes. NPG, as a private equity firm that owns Anthem, could theoretically terminate Asper from his role, but it's not as straightforward as flipping a switch. Private equity firms typically have significant control over their portfolio, including the power to influence or dictate major personnel decisions like firing a CEO. They hold the ultimate authority, which generally extends to appointing or removing key executives. However, there are practical and contractual nuances. Asper isn't just a hired CEO, he's also the majority shareholder of Anthem, a status he maintains even after the acquisition. This role complicates things. His shareholder position likely gives him leverage, such as a seat on the board or voting rights, which could make termination trickier unless his contract explicitly allows NPG to oust him without cause. Private equity deals often include governance agreements. Think shareholder agreements or operating contracts that outline who gets to make these calls. If NPG secured majority board control or a clause permitting them to remove executives at their discretion, they could put Asper out. Without seeing those documents, which aren't public, it's safe bet that they have some mechanism to exert this power, given their status in acquiring entity. That said, firing Asper would depend on the strategic goals. Private equity firms don't meddle in day-to-day operations unless the investment is underperforming or they're prepping for a sale. Asper's been steering Anthem since before the acquisition, growing it from a niche player into a broader media entity like TNA, Access TV, Fight Network. If TNA or Anthem's overall profitability tanks, say TV ratings dip below 100,000 consistently, or debt piles up, Anthem had financial wobbles before, NPG might see him as a liability and move to replace him with someone cheaper or more aligned with an exit strategy. But if he's delivering value, they'd have little incentive to rock the boat, especially given his ownership stake, which might require a buyout to fully sever ties, a costly proposition. So here's something that sort of like most plays into being private equity. Typically, and this is me, from my understanding, typically private equity buys something, sort of gussies it up, makes it more desirable, and then sells it for a profit. That's what private equity does. So my final question to Grok at the moment, we'll come back to Grok later. When would the timing be right for Northern Pacific Group to sell TNA? What signs should we look for? Determining the optimal time for NPG to sell TNA involves speculative analysis, since private equity firms like NPG don't publicly disclose their exit strategies. However, based on general private equity behavior and the wrestling industry's dynamics, we can outline key factors and signs that might indicate a favorable moment for sale. Private equity typically hold investments for 3 to 7 years, aiming to maximize returns by improving the asset's value and exiting at a peak. NPG's acquired Anthem, as we talked about, September 2016, meaning that they held it for over 8 years, already stretching beyond the typical window. This suggests they might be waiting for specific conditions to align for a profitable exit, or they could view TNA as a long-term portfolio asset, which is less common but not unheard of. For timing, the right moment would likely hinge on TNA's financial performance and market conditions. A strong upward trend in revenue, say from increased TV ratings, lucrative broadcast deals, or surge in live events, would boost its valuation. For instance, if TNA's weekly show started pulling numbers from 100 to 150,000, or pay-per-view buys, like Bound for Glory spike, that would signal a healthy asset ripe for sale. Another trigger could be a new high-value media rights deal, especially if Anthem leverages its ownership of access to bundle TNA content into a broader package. Market appetite is equality critical. Let's see what this means. The wrestling industry has seen consolidation, with WWE and AEW dominate, but there's niche demand for alternatives. Signs to watch include heightened interest from media conglomerates, Endeavor, which owns WWE, or Warner Brothers, tied to AEW, or streaming platforms like Netflix, which recently entered the wrestling space. If a bidding war emerges for smaller promotions, say a competitor like Ring of Honor gets scooped up, that could cue Northern Pacific Group to test the water. So a few years ago, when we had a number that we thought was accurate in terms of what Ring of Honor was sold for, and it seemed like a lot, I wrote an article that the time was right for TNA to be sold, but that might have been a little exaggerated. Operationally, TNA's recent stability under Anthem, including its 2024 rebrand to TNA, suggests an effort to capitalize on nostalgia and rebuild brand equity. Look for milestones like sold-out major events or successful talent-sharing deals like the one with WWE's. If these efforts translate into consistent growth, perhaps a 20 to 30% year-over-year increase in revenue or social media engagement, it could signal peak value. Actually, that's probably happening. Conversely, warning signs of a forced sale might include stagnation or decline, flatline ratings, talent exodus, if stars like Joe Henry jump ship, or Anthem shifting focus away from wrestling to other ventures. Industry buzz matters too. If insiders start whispering about Northern Pacific Group shopping Anthem around, that's a telltale sign. Ultimately, the sweet spot for Northern Pacific would be when TNA's growth trajectory peaks, but before market saturation or operation fatigue sets in, likely within the next 1 to 2 years, if current momentum holds. Watch for a combo of robust finances, a hot wrestling market, and buyer interest from media giants. Without insider data, it's a calculated guess. But those are the levels that typically move a private equity exit. Damn. John, I think I'm going to be replaced by a computer.
Man, Grok is pretty intense. Like when you ask them, and you could do the deep dive too, right? You could do the regular, and then you could do the deep dive on Grok. So Grok may be the way to go instead of Google as far as some searches and looking up stuff going forward. I could see. You know what I mean? I feel like Grok is kind of the way to go.
Yeah, I was very suspect of AI. I was like, I could just Google things, but like, you know, they do a good job. So I know Elon Musk. People are keying the Teslas right now and whatever, but good job on Grok. I actually asked them why Elon Musk is such a, and they said it's controversial. And I wrote, "Will Elon Musk read this?" And they're like, "No."
What about maybe some juicy news here, just as far as hirings and firings? Mostly, though, it seems like mostly firings. Oddly,
yeah. So I know it's all been reported publicly. But some of the people are more public figures than others. Certainly, Gail Kim is a public figure, having been a performer. And then sort of the second level executives. So there's a public element to it. But then some of the people that were fired are really just, you know, employees doing the best that they can. So I know that their names are out there. So I'm going to try to be sensitive, you know, not to you know, like overly share information about them, whereas the people that are most public, I think that's appropriate. So PW Insider received the following statement from Anthem President Carlos Silva. Today, we announced a restructuring resulting in staffing changes at TNA Wrestling. Always difficult, but it became apparent that we need to make adjustments to our business strategies. We are grateful for those who worked here and thank them for the years of dedication to the company. Finally, we want our fans to know that we are committed to producing the absolute best product and highest quality content that we can, and we appreciate their continued support. TNA president, okay, so Carlos Silva issued a memo to Anthem staff today. So the distinction is one was to the media, this one was to his staff. One of the most, so we don't have that actual, we have Mike Johnson personally like sort of reflecting on that. One of the most shocking departures was Errol Schneider, who was executive producer of TNA and effectively head of creative. Schneider had been with Anthem, TNA, and the Fight Network for many years. With his departure, Hunter Delirious Johnson will now have creative. Tommy Dreamer remains on the creative team as well. Tied for most shocking is the departure of Gail Kim, worked behind the scenes in talent relations and producing, and was a legitimate legend for the promotion. With her exit, Tommy Dreamer will now be heading the talent relations part of the company. Kim's run with the company dates back to 2005, initially as a performer, and she was one of the women who forged the Knockouts division before her current role. She's much loved and respected by the talent. Dreamer and Johnson will report to Silva. Okay, so now some of the other executives. Rob Klingman, who was Chief Revenue Officer, has also departed. He was named CRO just in June 2024. Prior to joining Anthem, Klingman served as Vice President of Market Operations at G Fuel and had also worked at WWE as their Vice President of Global Digital and Integrated Sports Sales. Every time there's a new executive, the emphasis is on like getting a rights deal and so on. So I don't know who was responsible for what, but the company overall did well with Canada, sort of picking up the network or distribution platform that WWE had used there. So, but also when Klingman came aboard, it appeared that he was involved. We don't know in terms of maximizing the fan experience and engagement at TNA events, meaning that they were able to raise the best seats, front row, and so on, ticket prices a lot, from what I noticed, and there was different packages that came with it and so on. So who else? Michael Shochenko will be exiting the digital department. He started with the company in 2023. Just to mention like first names, and we'll come back to their profiles as well. Karen and Rami from marketing. Sebastian on the live events and will be leaving as well. So Sebastian, I didn't have a lot of information on. His name was, I think, misspelled in the report. Eventually I found that he had actually worked for Toronto, I think Smash Wrestling. He had been involved with them as well, but we'll come back to the other profiles. Now, Raphael Morphy had been consulting and worked to build the company's live business and so on. So he had been reported as being gone, but he's been active on X, sharing how he's been consulting with TNA. So news of, thankfully it wasn't his demise, but news of his leaving the company, it may have been greatly exaggerated, as they say. So, but we'll come back to that. Okay, so and Silva also announced the company will welcome a new senior vice president of digital, David Clevinger, next month. Clevinger worked with the NFL. Okay, we'll get into his profile. And Nicole Rasheen, she worked for World Team Tennis. So it was actually smartly pointed out to me that Carlos Silva has a background in the World Team Tennis. So those with a World Team Tennis pedigree may have an insider track if they got along well with Silva at the company. Before we get into incoming, like their specific profiles and so on, anything else, John, on this element?
I'm just kind of curious, like with Raphael Morphy, obviously he's still working there, still consulting. So if you're just a consultant, there's no really firing anyway, right? I mean, you're like a consultant. You're not really a technical member of the organization, if you will, right? I mean, you're just a consultant.
Yeah, I think it might be like semantics. So if they had said we don't need your services anymore, I don't know if you would consider that a firing or we won't be renewing, but sort of like, I guess, like broadly like a disconnection there. And we'll get into what he had tweeted I maybe mislabeled into the outgoing category. So let's talk about the incoming talent here. So Karen Clevitt, actually, did I mess up my notes? So actually, sorry. Let me see here. Okay. Sorry, I might have mixed up my labeling here. So let's just go through it one at a time, and then we'll distinguish who's coming and going. So Karen Clevitt, who's going, she had served as a product, defined herself as a product owner with Anthem Sports from 2023 to present. She, before that, had been with Kyle Hauer as a senior marketing manager, Bell Media, which is a Canadian media company, senior web producer at Discovery Channel Canada, and webcast producer for StreamLogix. For additional outgoing. So this one to me also, of course, with Gail Kim. And I think like I'll probably talk less about Gail Kim just because, you know, everyone else has talked about her and her being a forward-facing role. And, you know, she brought me back to watching wrestling on television a bit whenever she would wrestle Awesome Kong. So that. But Ariel Schneider was really like the type that I thought was protected from all of these talent movements. He's like an original. He'd been with Anthem before it was Anthem and so on. So Fight Network from 2006 to 2014. Then when Anthem, I believe the process was right, Anthem acquired it. So then he was the senior director of programming for Anthem till 2020, director of global distribution and Impact Plus for TNA concurrently 2018-2020, the GM of the Fight Network for just 10 months, and then moving up to executive roles, Vice President of Business Development 2020 to 2024, Senior Vice President of Content Distribution and Marketing, February 2024 to present. So, you know, really a long, long history. So quite surprising there. So almost 19 years, 18, 19 years. Rob Kligman, and I don't know him, but we connected on LinkedIn. I interacted with him a little bit. I gave him a heads up for a while that on the TNA website that it was linking to Ticketmaster for some events, which were just resellers. So he did correct that, not saying that it was his fault or within his purview at all, but I just gave him the heads up and he was responsive of that. I was kind of greasing the wheels a little bit to ask him to come on the show eventually, but unfortunately that didn't work out. His time at TNA was actually a little bit longer than I remembered it. He was there for a year and 3 months, Chief Revenue Officer. Before that, like we mentioned, most notably with WWE for 7 years, 10 months. Michael Shuchenko, VP of Digital Operations. Before that, he had a run with Canadian Football League, various media, Bell Media. So that's, you know, a pedigree that a lot of people go through, especially Canadian companies. So just talking about Rami, who was a fractional marketing executive. Not familiar with that term, even though I'm a career coach, and for a year. Now, she actually gives some juicy stats here. Not all of them that I understand exactly, but it's kind of fun to see that from her LinkedIn profile. Drove 0 to 1 growth for TNA Wrestling in year 1 through optimization of key business channels, TNA Plus streaming services, and live events. Activated Invicta, the world's only female wrestling organization, that returned to hosting live events at CBS Sports Network. Fine. Achieved 100% TNA Plus subscriber growth year over year. So that's something we haven't heard before. I don't understand this stat. So if somebody knows, let me know. John, this might relate to your business background. Maybe you understand this. With 4.55 all-in LTV/CAC. I tried Googling it. Maybe I should have asked Rock. 80% plus increase in live event attendance. So we hadn't heard that before. Exact, numbers. 500% email list growth. 13 million newsletter send. Okay, so whatever. Delivered 8 consecutive premium live events sellouts across diverse markets: Chicago, Montreal, Louisville, San Antonio, Detroit, Winston-Salem, Atlanta, Dallas. So that's interesting, like how they counted it. So like if it was a double shot, it was just looking at the premier event. They should have highlighted that more. So that's certainly institutional knowledge. Now, the person that we talked about that we thought we lost was Raphael Morphy, who works for and still does, as far as I'm aware, Signature Move Productions, which owns Barclays. So he has an executive job there. Following his departure as vice president of live events touring at AEW, maybe he was reading the tea leaves from there. And before that, he was the live events tour manager production team with Anthem as a consultant. He doesn't list Anthem, he hasn't listed it. Sorry, I had confused something. So BSC Global is the parent company of Barclays Center. I was looking at something else that he was doing, but all that's to say that clearly he's still doing things with them, as he tweeted out the following: "My friends at TNA have had an incredible run of late. Great reason to spend a weekend in the Southland in one of the greatest pro wrestling markets in the U.S., Los Angeles, California." And he had also tweeted out, "Watching TNA Sacrifice Encore now on Access TV. Fun to work on this show in El Paso. Thanks, TNA, for allowing me to get a taste again of the business I miss and love, soliciting my counsel as recently as today on live event business strategy. TNA primed for a great 2025. So certainly some confusion going on there. Now, before we get to the actual incoming hires, apologies for the mix-up earlier. So firstly, TNA, so there was a headline, I'm not going to get into all of it, but TNA talent planning to leave. I think whenever there's a shakeup in the business, talent get upset. This could be in any business, right? I'm going to leave, I'm going to do this. But cooler heads may prevail eventually, because sort of like, where are you going to go? I have a family and so on. There's only so many Jordan Graces that stick to their guns and like, okay, Scott D'Amore was somebody that tied me to TNA because I really respected him. I'm not sure so many words, but where that's sort of in Jordan Grace's interview subsequently, like that was a reason that sort of pushed her to leave. But I think the timing clearly was right, for WWE run. Now, Body Slam reported, and I sort of followed up, like, are you sure? And they stood behind their source here, which is a fellow podcaster or YouTuber that had reported this, that apparently there was some friction between Schneider and Gail Kim, maybe like a power play, right? Like they're both pretty high up, and Carlos Silva, who's new, maybe he thought like, okay, both of you aren't acting professional, not in so many words, but like, I'm just going to cut bait on both of you. And that's a pretty big move. And I'm wondering if Carlos Silva had like the full power to do that, or if he had to go to Len Asper and be like, hey, I know that these people have been with the company forever, but, it feels like the right time to do this.
With that, though, who was the source? I was trying to figure out who's BQ or whatever that is. Is that a person that's a YouTuber, or is that somebody that remaining anonymous?
Yeah, I don't know if they're actually like anonymous in their, in their broadcasting and so on, but like I just looked at the report quickly, and then I saw that they have like a YouTube platform or presence. But I think the most important thing was like, is this pure speculation, or do they have contacts there? Our friend from Body Slam, who has been a supporter of the show, Gerald, I didn't listen fully to his voicemails yet, but I got the gist of it, that he stands behind this source.
Body Slam's usually pretty good.
And especially with the TNA reporting. So especially
they're usually spot on.
Before we respect that. So I don't like sincerely doubt. I just wanted to make sure to like shake it out. So it could certainly be true. I just that's the source, and maybe the truth will come out more. Gail Kim is certainly somebody that's not afraid of being outspoken. Firstly, not to dim anything like for herself, and from what I understand, like based on her financial prospects and her family and so on, like she doesn't have like any reason to like have to be tied to like one company or another. She's in like a good financial position that's been reported. So you could probably get like a good sense, at least from her perspective, of like telling the truth. Likely something I would speculate would come out later too.
As far as the incoming people and the incoming hires, who is actually coming into TNA Wrestling?
Yeah. So firstly, David Clevinger, Senior Vice President of Digital. So I'm just taking this from LinkedIn. Accomplished product management and digital media strategy executive with more than 20 years of experience working with major brands, NBC Universal, NFL, UFC, NBA, NHL, MLS. Investor and advisor to Cornelissen USA, the exclusive importer of 200-year-old family line of award-winning Belgian beers. So a little bit more details on his experiences. So I'm not sure if it's his family business and so on, but they do some esports as well. So I could see that like as a TNA connection. Fierce Signal LLC principal consultant for places like UFC.tv, but it doesn't seem like deeply embedded necessarily like in the company where he'd have like UFC institutional knowledge. He's done like some consulting there. He's also worked full time for IBM Watson. I think that was right. The IBM would promote it that it was good, like at chess or whatever. But he graduated with a BA from Virginia Tech and executive MBA from Quantic School of Business and Technology. Now, Nicole Racine, again, good point from Robert Joyner, who said that she comes from WTT and made that connection. So in her LinkedIn, and everyone can take it how they want, in terms of building LinkedIn, she doesn't actually describe her duty. She just puts like 1,000, I'm exaggerating, 1,000 keywords. So we could just talk broadly about that without saying each keyword. So she's been in Anthem since March, Senior Vice President of Sales. Prior to that, Vice President of Sponsorship and Partnership at the Washington Justice. I'm not familiar with that sports team. I should have looked that up more. Is that like a women's soccer? I'm not familiar. Mubadala City DC Open, Vice President of Sponsorship and Partnership. And in terms of World Team Tennis, 2020-21, a year and a quarter, Vice President of Sales and Sponsorship. She was an account executive early in her career with Fox Sports and Fox Cable Network and all of that. So no shade on either of these people. I don't know them enough, and they seem very capable and accomplished in their careers. But at the moment, and everyone grows, and there's growing pains, and you have to get sometimes a new, fresh approach and so on. But if you look at the exodus of 7, taking Rafael Morphy out of the equation, and hopefully he's still going to continue there because that's a huge asset that they have, especially in a consulting role. If you were to take the 7 people that had been employed there, and you look at the 2 that are incoming, I think that's a huge amount of institutional knowledge lost.
Man, when you look at, obviously TNA and all these people, it is interesting to look at the executive team, like on the website and the operational and the leadership team. Is all that stuff accurate, or is that not accurate? Just like when you're going through it, 'cause do they update it when they're updating all this other stuff?
Yeah, so that's a great question, because I've actually been waiting for them. I may be the only person in the world, but I've been waiting for them to update it with Carlos Silva's information, because he's not listed in either the executive team or where I'd imagine where he'd fall, or the operational leadership team. And he had been announced several months ago in this role. So it just might be an oversight. In my full-time job, I help to manage like our sort of niche website. And sometimes you just don't get around to doing such things. But usually when there's a staff transition or update in titles, that's one of the things that you touch first. So maybe it's just an oversight, or, the person that does it hasn't been available or whatever, but sometimes it's telling also. So yeah, it's quite outdated. In terms of the executive team, they have Anthony Siccioni still listed there. Now, one of the people that we don't talk about as much is Niral Merchant, because we don't know as much about him beyond the profile on his LinkedIn, but he was somebody that was quoted in the article when they were recently involved in the show in Qatar, right? So so that's somebody that's powerful and so on, that that doesn't get talked about as much. Then, of course, the operational leadership team. I wouldn't expect that they would run to remove Ariel Schneider so fast, but obviously that has to be updated and it doesn't reflect the new hire. So if you don't see Carlos Silva there, like obviously it hasn't been touched in several months. So one more grok. I won't go crazy with this. John, I considered like pitching to you an idea where we just like answer some of the unanswerable questions, like see what grok has to say about it. So maybe we'll have some fun with that, like on a holiday weekend or something. But with TNA fans, I'm not going to get into the question that I asked about why TNA fans always defend the company even when it's clear that certain things aren't working. But in terms of the Gail Kim getting fired, like what did I ask specifically? How hard are TNA wrestling fans trying to find a positive to Gail Kim getting fired? TNA wrestling fans are grappling with the news, and while many are expressing shock, disappointment, and frustration, some are attempting to find a silver lining. Based on sentiment expressed on X, the efforts to spin this into a positive vary in intensity and creativity, though they are often overshadowed by the predominant negative reactions. Some fans are cautiously optimistic, suggesting that Gail Kim's departure from TNA could open doors for her to contribute to women's wrestling. For instance, there's speculation that her exit might lead to a role with WWE, given the existing TNA-WWE relationship. Lavie here. That seems like a bridge too far, right? Like she had, right? You have to be fired by TNA to utilize the relationship TNA has with WWE to make it to TNA, to make it to WWE. This idea reflects a hope her firing isn't an end, but or actually no, they're just reflecting what TNA wrestling fans said. This idea reflects a hope that her firing isn't an end, but a transition to new opportunity. Yeah, we all hope that as well. The majority of fan reaction, however, lean heavily into criticism of TNA's decision. So even with TNA fans, always trying to defend things. And again, I'm just reflecting back what I see. I have no bias against TNA and any of that. As listeners so know, I mostly don't watch wrestling at all. I just like following it from the business perspective. I like to go to the live events, and once in a while something captures my interest that's modern that I'll go out of my way to see, but mostly I watch the old stuff. So before we get into upcoming events, anything to tie a bow on all the executive craziness?
It just seems like, I don't know, the question I always have in my head is like, why? Like, if they're successful, why is so many changes? And I think that's going to be left unanswered. And obviously, the door is going to be left open for if this is the right move or not. Only time will tell. We'll see. It just fascinates me every time we're like, wow, they're hitting a high mark. They're going to the USB arena. Hey, they're El Paso sold out 2 nights in a row. It was the greatest attendance ever. Let's make changes. To me, it's just crazy. It's too much.
Yeah, I think like the only, besides like the ego thing, speculation and like business politics, the only other thing to look at is like if somebody blew the budget out of the water. And I don't think like we saw that with El Paso, right? They brought in like Chavo Guerrero, which, relatively so I would think would be reasonable. I don't know his rates these days, especially working with Hollywood, and happy for his career in that way. But like, I didn't see like an excessive amount of like advertising or hot shotting or anything like that. It just seemed like right place, right timing, right promotion, right appeal, and so on. And they hit it out of the park. Happens, and we'll see in the schedule. Mostly the same executive management team have been responsible for. Sometimes you win, and sometimes you don't.
So let's talk about the upcoming events. What's coming up? Speaking of the UBS arena, what's going on?
Yeah, so just to put a frame on what upcoming events, and then we'll go them one by one. So as we record this, I guess tonight, literally, so it'll have happened. So St. Joseph, Missouri, double shot, 2 nights of Impact tapings. Vegas, Unbreakable, April 17th, of course, over WrestleMania weekend. LA, Rebellion on April 27th. Irvine, California, double shot TNA Impact tapings, May 1st and 2nd. Under Siege and a TNA taping in Brampton, Ontario, Canada. Our rivals to the north for us Americans right now. May 23rd and Elmont, of course, TNA Slammiversary on July 20th. We'll probably see something announced in June as we get closer. Okay, so just watching for a long time, TNA Slammiversary. How are things moving? Slowly. They've put promotion behind it. They've sent talents to the Islanders games and so on. But after after getting off many expected, it's been fairly slow. Obviously, still a ways out, saying that a while, but we'll have to see once it's we're getting close to the 90 days out, and then start seeing things picking up 90 days, 60 days, 30 days, and certainly in the weeks leading up to it. But plus 41 tickets in 7 days, 2,470 tickets in terms of a modest setup of 4,101. Okay, so now St. Joseph, just to note that the Hardy Boys were covered in local media there. Usually what I do, unless there's something extraordinarily interesting about the first night, usually I just look at that map and assume the second night is depressed attendance, unless once in a while, right, it's like reversed. But just looking at March 28th, so this one, and as you're looking at executive teams, be like, okay, you booked not maybe like semi-major, mid-major type of venue. It's larger than maybe they need. And here is more of like a potential typical night for TNA, where at least as of a day ago, it was just 2 or 3 rows where there was some movement in tickets, a little bit more here and there. We don't know the general admission part. So that one not looking strong. But for TNA Wrestling Prevents Unbreakable, which is actually on UNLV's campus, and I'm I wouldn't say like a long-time college basketball fan, but it does remind me like UNLV, right? That was like Derek Coleman, right, in the early 90s. So they had sold out the reserved tickets, so obviously a win there. GA looks like, they don't, we can't tell, but from the shading, it looks like many tickets remain in the GA. But obviously, if they already sold out their reserved and we're a few weeks out, obviously looking very good there. Now with the show in California on the campus of USC, they've actually included Joe Henry in their social media pictures. So that just shows how much Joe Henry resonates and how important he is to the promotion. The Rebellion show, of course, on April 27th. So most of the modest reserved tickets, most of them are gone. And at certain points, it's listed like few tickets remaining. Obviously, that's like, GA, I'd imagine, are like a modest amount have been released. Obviously, if it goes better, then we'll see a lot more there. May 1st, of course, in California. It's harder to tell, but it's early. So like on the floor or close to the ring, those tickets are moving, and then less so apparently based on the shading as you get further away from the ring. I think looking really good and not surprising in certainly the same venue that Len Asper has his now minor league basketball team. I don't know if they're playing now or what that season looks like, if there's any local tie-ins. I haven't seen anything come across my Google alerts, but that is looking good. I think that will be a good house relatively for them. And John, to tie a bow on things for the week, this is a real throwback. Condolences to the family of Janice Carter, of course, from the Carter family, who literally saved TNA as it was going quickly into the red in its earliest days. And for all the criticism and so on, TNA has survived. And nobody publicly necessarily knew Janice Carter. Only someone like Jeff Jarrett can reflect back on it. But from what we understood, that she, was very hands-on in terms of managing the finances and steering the ship. And obviously, for the most part, it was for the positive, because the company was profitable for some years and then eventually sold.
R.I.P. Janice Carter. Abyss, remember, infamously had his barbed wire baseball bat was called Janice, and obviously a little bit of tongue in cheek there, a little bit of a joke, obviously, meaning Janice Carter. Interesting. Just a little side note. You mentioned Derek Coleman. He went to the University of Syracuse. The
Oh, really?
UNLV team was very, very famously known for Grandmama Larry Johnson, Greg Anthony, Elmore Spencer, and of course the legend, the Plastic Man, Stacey Augmon, all went to UNLV. So that team was loaded for Jerry Tarkanian back in the day. But yeah, that was a great, great team.
A reminder for me to stay in my lane. But I love Larry Johnson, and like, there's funny memes that go around. It's sort of like if you didn't have an NBA team in the '90s, like you were a Charlotte Hornets fan, and that's like 100%
Yes,
true. Like
yes.
that Hornet logo was like the coolest thing back in the day.
And those starter jackets, come on, those colors, that was the best. They were awesome.
Yeah, that was really cool.
And Stacey Augmon, that's arguably the greatest nickname of all time, the Plastic Man. I mean, that's great. I love that nickname. So let's wrap this bad boy up and head towards the plugs. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at 2Man Power Trip. How about you, Lavie?
Yeah, follow me on X, LAVIE, MARG. Check out my long form articles on Lion Cub Job Search. Join our LinkedIn group, The Business of the Business. We are the official business podcast of PW Ponderings, and we are distributed by the Creative Control Network.
Awesome stuff. And don't forget next week, Lavie, not only talking about WWE ID, we will be discussing here and there our favorite topics. So don't forget about that for next week.
Yeah, we might have a lot of news, so it might be here, there, and everywhere.
Nice. Like it. All right. Thank you, everybody out there, for listening. See you right back here next time for a little business of the business. See you next week, folks.